Welcome back to Speed Demon Painting, where today we are taking a look at the Crown Order of Battle for Dystopian Wars. The first thing we do when we're looking at one of these Orbats is checking out the special rules for the faction, and the first rule that the Crown gets, the thing that makes them special, is Ablative Prow Armor. This has been changed in all of the recent Orbats. Ablative Hour now removes one action die, not from the entire pool, but for each weapon with either gunnery or fusillade that is supporting the attack against the model. This makes it more specialized in what it does, but it makes it a lot better than what it used to be. The only difference being these Canadians only have it when they're being attacked from the front arc, essentially. When an opposing ship is attacking them from the front arc, they get ablative armor, which is very strong. The other thing that they now get is Armor of Contempt. If they get into the most disordered stage, that means that you can't even have your own weapons within the same ship supporting each other. They just treat it as an emergency instead. So this protects them from getting too many debuffs from panic. The stoic British will just cancel that. However, there's one important note: if you actually take further disorder tokens, you will still take damage, because you still have the Chaos and Disarray level. The other rule that they get is Heavy Magazines. This is the big buff to all new flagships, and the Crown gets this as well. It means that all heavy gun batteries, regular gun batteries, heavy rocket batteries and rocket batteries, regular ones, can have up to 3 of those weapons using their lead value instead of support value to contribute to the attack dice pool, which is very strong. It means the firepower from flagships is incredibly scary, and in our game so far we have found out that one of those flagships activating is a tense moment for the opponent. So good job to Warcradle, they buffed flagships to where they should be. Now a changed rule is Lionhearted Crew. You can reroll your blank results when you're being targeted by a boarding action. So the Crown ships are slightly more difficult to just board compared to the other ones, which is important because the normal British ships, as we'll later find out, are quite good at ramming as well. They also have Royal Engineers, so they can count blank results as normal counters when making repair rolls, so they will get rid of their debuffs faster than most other factions. The final 2 rules are related to SRS tokens. The first one is Tail Gunners. When you're making an interception with Crown's fighters, they can re-roll any blanks to see what it does. Now, just for a quick recap, if you are intercepting enemy SRS tokens with your own, normally you remove counters for each. You remove SRS tokens from the enemy for every counter that you roll. A heavy counter counting as 2, of course. However, they can re-roll the blanks, which would not normally do anything. That makes it quite good because interceptions have a chance to really remove quite a lot of SRS tokens. And the next thing that they do really well is there's also a defensive roll. Their SRS tokens can scramble up to 10 inch instead of 5 inch. So when used in a defensive roll, they have a larger bubble in which they protect your own ships, which is very strong for the Crown. The next thing we are taking a look at are the different battle fleets. Now, the Crown have got the following special rules for their battle fleets. The Commandery roll, we've noticed this one before in the other deep dives. It's your bad luck protection. Should you make a really atrocious roll, you can re-roll it once, just by picking up all of the dice and re-rolling them again. Mind you, dice can only be re-rolled once, so you don't want to make use of any rolls that sort of try to compensate for that atrocious roll. You just do them all at once, or not at all. And secondly, they get the Snowbird Strike. Now, it is associated with Canadian fleets, but it works incredibly similarly to how the old Cloud Strike used to work for Empire forces. In the second and fourth round, you can create a stack of SRS tokens equal to the number of units from that fleet in the play area at the start of that round. And you then assign it to one of the ships in that fleet, and that's the ship counting as the one launching it. Now, that has to be launched in the special SRS phase, and that is done within 20 inch of that unit, as you would expect. There's no long-range sortie shenanigans going on or anything. You don't get double ADV against them. You just create a stack of supporting flying units, which is nice. They behave almost like any of the other Crown SRS tokens, except for the fact that they do not gain any benefits from the tail gunner rules. So you can still send them out on an interception if you want, but they won't be as effective as other Crown tokens are. But it's a nice bonus. You don't get this bonus though with the generic Crown battle fleet, you only get the commandery role, but as always this is the most flexible way of building your force. It just has to be a Crown trait unit, and then you can select it in this battle fleet. Now, the themed battle fleets, there are 4 of them. The first one is the Britannia battle fleet, which of course relies on the Britannia class battleship, which is your heavy battleship that you can use. And you have to include an Albion unit in that one. However, if you do so and you include a maximum sized Albion unit, your Britannia class will actually get the devastating quality to their heavy gun batteries, which is, with the new heavy magazines rule, quite a step up. So it's well worth investing in this one, if you ask me. The other battle fleet that they get is the Victory battle fleet. This is when you take the Dreadnought class Mass 4 Victory class ship. You do have to take an Excalibur unit in this battle fleet, and your additional bonus will not kick in unless you have a maximum sized Excalibur unit or a Hotspur unit. But I recommend maxing out your Excalibur unit because that's the one you have to take anyway. And when you do so, you have your Hotspur class units not have their SRS capacity reduced when crippled. I think this is a bit of a weird one though. You are forced to take any Excalibur units, and unfortunately it's not your Victory ship that gets to keep all of its SRS tokens when it's crippled. It's just the Hotspur class units. So yeah, in order to get the benefit from this battle fleet, you have to invest quite a lot of points in a Victory class ship, which is not cheap, B, a maximum sized or at least a Excalibur unit, and then C, enough Hotspur units to make it work. So I think this is a tricky one. It's once you meet all of those 3 requirements, you will have fleshed out most of your fleet as it is. It's not a bad bonus, but it is a very heavy investment in it. And then the other ones is one that, as again, has not been released yet. It's the Canadians with the Protecteur battle fleet, where you have to take this sort of submarine class, if I'm not mistaken, the flagship unit from the Canadians, and one of their submarine units called the Orca unit. And if you take those, you get that Snowbird strike I mentioned earlier to get that special SRS ambush in round 2 and 4. And then a very interesting one as well, you can take a Nautilus battle fleet, which is just the Nautilus, which acts as a flagship. Now, it can't be joined by anything with an escort duty, and you get a free commandery roll out of that one. Now, the Nautilus is a named variant of the Morgana submarine, as we'll discover later on in this deep dive, and pretty much all factions can take this one, because there are a bunch of swashbucklers. Now, of course, they also get the mercenaries from other battle fleets, the Black Wolf, but we'll discuss that battle fleet when we get to the Commonwealth Orbat, the Honourable Eclipse Company, but we'll discuss it when we get to the Union Orbat. the League of Crimson, same for the Sultanate. And yeah, they have the Nautilus as their own one. It's a bit of a step up in points compared to the normal one, but it is a funky little ship, and lore-wise, I just love that one, so I've got a bit of a soft spot for it. When we are looking at the Crown outfitting yards, we will find a fleet that is incredibly traditional. There's not a lot of equipment that you will find here that cannot also be found in other factions, except for two noticeable differences. First up is the Guardian Generator. It removes one action die from the dice pool for every attack against this model, and it is clearly stated that it stacks in addition with the removal of dice provided by any shield generators. So Crown ships do have the option of removing a lot of dice from any attack, and it's something that they do particularly well. The other type of generator that they have that is unique to them is this one, the Trident Generator. It's a bubble. If you are within 5 inch of a model with a generator, this type of generator, then your torpedo attacks gain the homing quality, which is quite handy because torpedoes is one of those things that the Crown does really well compared to other factions. The Trident Generator being one of those reasons behind it. Because when we're looking at their weapons themselves, you won't find many things that other factions don't also have. Main differences are the fragmentation launcher, which I personally think is a very, very good one. 4 dice as lead weapon with 3 in sustained. No point blank 3 in support, I should say. No point blank range, but they do have sustained. And if you have a ship that has them, they'll have 4 of those, chucking out an amazing amount of dice, and that ship is particularly noteworthy, as we'll see later down the line. Other than that, the other thing that sets them apart is they have, especially the British ones, this heavy prow ram. At ramming 10 and piercing, it means a lot of these ships can just torpedo away at a long distance, and should the enemy get close, they still have a nasty ramming attack as a counter punch, which is something to take note of if you're a Crown player. They can do very, very well. And one particular one is interesting, that is the heavy torpedo turret. It's something that can replace your gun batteries, and when we're looking at the shooting profile, it essentially shoots with the same dice as a normal torpedo salvo, as typically found on cruisers, with exactly the same attack profile: submerged torpedo and extreme range, both on the heavy torpedo turret and the normal torpedo salvo. It's a bit weird with the heavy word being in there because you still have a heavy torpedo salvo as well, but regardless, they can stack. And if you put a lot of these heavy torpedo turrets on ships that innately have torpedo salvos themselves, and one of them comes equipped with the before mentioned Trident generator, you can create some particularly devastating attacks with these Crown units. They also have an attack profile for that Trident generator, which has 7 dice with only a single one in support, so you don't really want to stack those. But they come with a piercing attack with a magnetic quality, so that can at a pinch just remove a bit of damage as well, because that Trident generator has the quality of just taking away the ability to steer from the opponent. However, they did nerf it somewhat compared to a previous iteration, because technically it causes that navigation lock on the opponent, but it cannot cause any catastrophic explosions. So if you take a squadron of 3 cruisers and you swap out 3 of them with Trident generators, you can't just create a single navigation lock and then 2 more catastrophic damage, because that ship already has navigation lock. It was nerfed this way, and for good reason. Next up are the flagships, and we're starting off with the Britannia heavy battleship. Now, heavy really is the word here, because when you look at the weapons, it's the heavy prow ram, the heavy gun battery, 3 of those, heavy broadside, heavy torpedo salvo. This thing just screams heavy. It also has an above average citadel value with an above average amount of hull points. This thing is an absolute tank. And with the inclusion of the new heavy magazines, those heavy gun batteries shoot for heavy damage, especially in the fleet, giving all of these heavy gun batteries the devastating quality. So this thing can really put out a lot of damage. In fact, if you're taking it in a Britannia battle fleet, I would advise against swapping any of the heavy gun batteries for other weapons. You do, however, have to sort of get a sideways angle on your opponent if you want to make use out of a lot of these weapons. It comes jam-packed with guns, but do be mindful of its placement, because, well, the heavy prow ram, of course, is only forward-facing, as are the torpedo salvos, but you really want to make sure that you use that broadside and those heavy gun batteries. One of them is pointed backwards with a 270-degree angle, so getting the most out of this back one will be the trickier thing. Other than that, internal guardian generator, which is really strong, and should you so desire, you can always swap out that somewhat awkwardly placed aft weapon for a shield generator for a very hefty -4 dice on all attacks targeting it. So that can be quite a strong option for these ships. The next one that we are discussing is a new one. It's from the Canadian fleet that is yet to be released. It's a submarine, which is nice to see. A submersible carrier, a very unique ship. It has an SRS capacity of 5, so nothing truly stellar, but at the same time it does come with 2 forward-facing heavy torpedo salvos, so it does that very well. And with the internal guardian generator, it provides it with a bit of extra protection, especially because it's also a submerged unit, which will be quite hard to tackle. And it gets the benefit of a mine layer, so you can block off some easy lanes to objectives with mines, which is always a very clutch thing to have during gameplay. It can also arrive via unexpected arrival if you want to. It does cost a bit of points, 10 points, and if you're using any Orca models, more on which later, which are accompanying submarines, they also gain the unexpected arrival, meaning if you want to use all 3 of those torpedo salvos, you can do some very creative popping up in the middle of the open seas and just blasting away at your opponent. So, yep, I like this entry. I really do. I can't fault it. It seems like a very reasonable points cost to be associated with it. It's not jam-packed with armor. It doesn't have heavy magazines, but again, it doesn't have the weapons for it. So I'm not hating on it at all. Another unique thing that the Crown can do is that they can use Mass 2 cruisers as flagships. You take this Sabre command cruiser, which always comes in a pack of 2, and I think this was new, but you can now include a 3rd one at a cost of 130 points extra, which is weird. That's cheaper than the basic 2 of them, but seeing as they already are a squadron, you can't attach any escorts to it. So you can't have an escort duty ship attaching to something that is already a unit. Now, it is the heaviest type of cruiser that you can get. Normal gun battery, heavy gun battery, one pointed forward at 270 degrees and one pointed to the back at 270 degrees. So it does have some teeth as well, and it has a torpedo salvo. And should you so desire, if you want a more favorable firing arc, with those torpedoes as well, you can always swap out the rear heavy gun battery for a generator as well, one that stacks with internal Guardian generator. If you want to go for the shield generator, however, I wouldn't opt for it, because shield generators are now directly proportional with the mass of the ship, so you're not getting the most out of that one. Also, they come with logistical support, so if you want to have an extra number of victory and valor cards in your hand, this might be a good option to go for. It also means that crown fleets can have nothing but plastic in them, which is also a fun thing to have. And then you have a named variant of this called the Lord's Hood, which always comes with 3 of them installed. So it also has the same restrictions, just gets that maritime patrol as well, meaning you can reroll blank results when attacking submerged units if you have SRS tokens nearby. So it's a bit like Spotter, but just for submerged units only, and not quite as powerful a bonus. But yep, if you want to go for that one for 400 points, it's a bit of a steep increase in points, however, I think, for what they do, so I'm not a particularly big fan of the Lord's Hood as an entry just now. There's also an option of including Mass 2 ships for the Canadians, which is the Toronto Control Cruiser. It has 2 forward-facing heavy rocket batteries and a heavy torpedo salvo with just a light broadside, so this is, again, seems like a very easy ship to control. With cloud hunting, internal Guardian generator, and comes with that lovely Canadian ablative prow armor. So I'm thinking you will probably have something that is incredibly tough for, you know, Mass 2 ships at least. Also comes with logistical support, maritime patrol, and even Skyfire, so they're better at shooting aerial units. I really like this entry as well. Seems like a very solid one, and if you can just make these out of the plastics, this means that you are quite likely also able to make a full Canadian fleet using only plastic sets in the near future. And then the big girl, Victory Heavy Carrier. The Victory class has, again, very solid, high citadel value, high amount of hull points as well, so you're seeing a lot of things to like. There is only one downside to it. I think the cost is incredibly reasonable at 335 points, let's just start with that. But the big downside is the somewhat awkwardly placed rocket batteries. The ship does come with heavy magazines, so 3 of those rocket batteries are firing at lead value for a single attack, which is great. But then when you're actually looking at the firing arcs, there is no way, unless you're shooting at the rear, which makes it a bit awkward, that you can just stack all 3 of them together. And so I found that to be a bit of a downside. For that reason alone, I would opt for the name variant underneath here, the HMS Ark Royal, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It does come with 10 SRS tokens, again, very good SRS tokens in the Crown fleet, so that is a very good thing to have. Comes with an internal shield generator. For a Mass 4 ship, that means it's -3 dice, which is great, and it's been buffed with the new SRS mine clearance option and SRS recon flight. With 10 SRS capacity, that means you can almost shuffle through your entire deck. And let's not forget, if you're taking that one in its dedicated fleet, any Hotspur units you're including as well don't even lose their SRS capacity. We've talked about this at the very start of the video. But yeah, if you want to take the name variant, you're essentially paying quite a bit of extra points. I mean, you bump it up from 335 to 380 points, which is significant, but suddenly you get those 3 heavy gun batteries with heavy magazines, as you would expect, but all of them in a forward-facing fire arc with a torpedo salvo for good measure. So it's just it's a ship that has a way better weapon loadout. Now, for the required 45 points for it, is that worth it? You decide. I just know that if that thing can fire with all 3 rockets at full capacity at something, that can be incredibly devastating, in particular because of one ship that we'll encounter later down the line, the one with the mortar, who can just take away any defense value from your opponent. So the downside to using rockets is of course that they are aerial, your opponent gets to use their air defense value, and the Crown has an option to just shut that down. So this can be an incredibly powerful ship, the HMS Ark Royal, when combined with a few other things. You also gain inspirational, so you get a free reroll for all units, excluding this one though, within 10 inch of the model, and also comes with that internal shield generator as you would expect, and elite crew. While making or defending from an assault, this unit may reroll blank dice results. It's a bit of a weird one because you already had the bonus from the other ones. Forgot what the name was, but they could already reroll blanks in defense, and yeah, now they can do so in offense as well with this ship, which can be handy. I mean, Fray 13 is nothing to joke at. So this thing can get up close and personal should it so desire. I like this entry a lot as well. And now, as always, the meat and potatoes of the fleet, the Mass 2 and Mass 1 ships that make up the bulk of your army, the cruisers and frigates. Now we start off with the Agincourt bombardment cruiser, which was nerfed slightly compared to the previous Orbat. The Tyrannus naval mortar, very fearsome weapon with 12 dice as lead and 8 as support, has been nerfed, and it no longer has an innate blast quality. You have to buy that upgrade for 20 points, and given how it's now 130 points for the baseline model, that does make it more expensive than it ever was. And the big thing about it is you can only declare one specific type of munition to be used in one go, so you can no longer have that devastating quality stacked on top of it, and that is where the big nerf is in essence. Compared to the previous one, I think it's only a bump up with 5 points compared to just buying the ship and ripple, which is not that bad, but then the fact that you can't use devastating and blast at the same time makes it, yeah, a bit of a nerf as well. It's a weird ship. It takes up a weird position within the Crown fleet, I think, because it's not like the Crown has issues attacking at extreme range, as it is. I mean, you have very much an emphasis on using torpedoes in this fleet, and so the need for a long-range bombard like the Agincourt is lessened, I think. So it has a bit of a weird spot. But overall, it is not a bad entry, don't get me wrong. It's just that it gets a bit outclassed by another entry that we'll discover later on. The Albion cruiser is sort of the bread and butter cruiser that the Crown has access to. It's 105 points. When we're looking at the stat line, there's not really one thing that particularly jumps to mind or jumps out. But it does have the internal Guardian generator, so that's 1 dice that's being reduced, and there's no longer a need for the Guardian generator to be near a ship with a shield generator for it to work, so that's a good thing. As standard Frontline squadron cruisers, these are super decent, but there is one interesting build I have found. If you take the rear heavy gun battery and you swap that one out with, for instance, the shield generator, you will knock off 10 points off of the cost, and you can then reinvest that for just 3 points to swap out the front gun battery for a heavy torpedo turret. And that means if you take 2 ships with a shield, so you use 2 of those, you get some very tough ships as well, but you can also have 1 within that unit with the Trident generator installed as well. And that means that you get some extra juice in your torpedo attacks, and you shoot no less than 5 torpedo salvos, or the equivalent of that, with those ships, while being tough as old boots. So I thought that was a very interesting build for your Albions, and feel free to experiment with those. I think that can be a great choice. Another thing that they can do, by the way, is they have an escort duty for the British, meaning you can bump up the torpedo salvos by just slapping a cheeky Trident generator on one of those and having it escort one of the other ones. Although I think there might be a problem with you don't gain any benefit from any special rules, weapons or generators of the unit it joins, but I still think it can work with the Trident generator, because that's sort of a bubble, and it doesn't mention anywhere that the main ship can not benefit from this guy's generators. So yeah, I think that still might work in that one. And you bump up the ADV and SDV, so what's not to like? Now, as I was already alluding to when I was talking about the Agincourt, the Athelstan flak cruiser is the thing that I love most in this Crown fleet. Why? It has 4 fragmentation launchers. If we recall from earlier in the video, those had 4 as the lead weapon, 3 as the support weapon, and sustained, meaning one of these is going to chuck 13 dice with sustained out, and it has this one glorious rule: shrapnel. The first critical damage result is caused by an attack from this unit, and that's not too difficult. 13 dice with sustained is going to, in general, lead to at least a critical result being rolled. And if you manage to do so, it's going to suffer from shredded defenses. Standard. If it doesn't have that already. Now, why is this absolutely brilliant? Well, that means that you open up to a whole lot of abuse from anything with torpedoes that you would normally get your submerged defense value against. Or if you were talking about units like the HMS Ark Royal that just shoots 3 heavy magazine, heavy rocket batteries at you, that's gonna cause some damage. That's gonna sting. And I think this ship in particular is one that I would recommend to anyone starting out with the Crown. Not just one, perhaps even 2 or 3 of these, simply because they are so crucial in having synergies with the other ships. One option for the frontline squadrons is the Bedivere Monitor. It's a fairly light ship, comes with a heavy prow ram, as you'd expect, just a single heavy rocket battery, and a normal torpedo salvo. This one can again be swapped out to become a complete heavy torpedo turret fest, if you manage to keep it closely to one ship that has a Trident generator as well. They don't get the easy, let me just swap the thing, the gun battery out in the back, but you get access to cheap 90 points torpedo salvo ships, which I think is well worth it to supplement any Albion cruisers that do come with those Trident generators. This one's new. It's the Bonaventure Strike Cruiser at 132 points. It is a costly one, but it does seem like it is a solid entry. 2 front-facing heavy gun batteries with 270-degree angles, and a single light gun battery, 270-degree angle, but aimed at the back. Now, I don't think this light gun battery is really going to come into play very often, because this is a Canadian ship, and as we talked about, those have the ablative prow armor, so you kind of want to point them into the direction of the unit it is engaging to have an advantage with that ablative armor in the front arc. It does also come with an internal Guardian generator, so that is a very strong option. It's just a shame that that gun battery is pointed in a bit of an awkward angle for it. The Caliburn frigate, that's the cheap and cheerful frigates that you get within the Crown. Actually, at Armor 5 and Citadel 9, they are surprisingly tough for frigates, and I don't consider these to be bad entries at a mere 22 points per model. And with the auxiliary mine layer as an additional advantage to them, definitely worth considering them. I do think the point distribution is a bit odd though. You get 3 Caliburn frigates for 69 points, which makes 23 points per model, and the next 3 are just 22. That might be because of the auxiliary mine layer thing though, that the additional models are cheaper, because it's not like they're adding anything to that particular rule, so it might just make sense. Also, speed 12 and linear dash makes for a very rapid unit for some quick objective grabbing, so yeah, strong entry in my book. The Excalibur Heavy Destroyer is expensive for a Mass 1 ship, but it comes with that respectable 5 armor and 9 citadel and 3 hull points, 2 normal gun batteries, one end to the front with 270 degrees and one to the back, with normal broadsides, which is quite a big deal for Mass 1 ships at a very reasonable 35 points. So they have broadsides that you would expect on cruiser type weapons, making for some destroyers that are really good in a side firing position. And with Vanguard, you will be able to set yourself up for some absolutely glorious broadside bonanza with these ones. So yep, I think this is a very solid option as well. A new option is the Halifax Shield Cruiser, 130 points, which is not cheap, but we're actually finally getting a sort of a long-range generator ship, albeit only with the internal Guardian generator that it has. But this unit is equipped with a special type of projector that allows it to extend its shields to another vessel in range, meaning this unit and any friendly models within 5 inch of this unit count as being equipped with a shield generator, alongside the internal Guardian generator. So that is a very, very tough ship that has a good firing arc. I mean, 2 front-facing gun batteries, heavy gun batteries, torpedo salvo, and ablative prow armor means that it is mega tough to crack. It provides shields to all units nearby, and so many things in the Crown come with internal Guardian generators that I actually think this ship might just well be worth its, you know, higher 130 point value. It's yeah, definitely one to experiment with should you get those models when they come out. The Hotspur support carrier next is the traditional Mass 2 carrier with SRS capacity 4, which is what you'd expect, very similar to other ships in other fleets, with an escort duty for British ships, so that can help as well if you want to send in something with an extra torpedo salvo and a cheeky 4 very good defensive SRS tokens. Can definitely work. So they also gained a new option to get the number 1 squadron. It requires you to take a maximum sized Hotspur unit. Remember, if you take them in a victory fleet, you want to invest in Hotspur units, and if you're already doing so, this upgrade could be well worth taking. Why? You get number 1 SRS squadrons, and they can re-roll any blank attacks on the attack run. So chucking out 12 SRS tokens is already quite decent. If you combine that with the 10 SRS tokens from a victory class, then you can make an absolutely devastating attack run on the enemy, and 22 of those SRS tokens, that's gonna ruin anyone's day, even if you get double ADV from them entering via long-range sortie in the first turn, so yeah, worth considering. Next up is the Lancelot heavy cruiser. I think that one's a bit expensive at 128 points. That's a significantly higher point cost than most other heavy cruisers in other armies, while not offering that much more. You know, you do get the heavy broadsides and everything. You do get the internal Guardian generator, and this unit can become very tough. I just like the Albion better for the option of taking the alternate build. That's all. Not a bad entry. Don't get me wrong, it's not like one of those where you go, you'd be soft in the head for taking this. I'm just, you know, I'm not seeing it all that much. 5 hull points is great, but it's offset somewhat by only having 3 in its cripple state, so it has got toughness, but it's not mega tough compared to other ones. It's also a bit on the slow end of the scale. You know, I have my doubts about this ship. The Morgana Assault Submarine, new entry on the support squadrons that were recently released in the Victory set. They have a heavy torpedo salvo for to the front and a normal torpedo salvo to the rear. Not easy to set up, obviously, but the heavy torpedo salvo to the front is the one that is interesting, because you're only paying 80 points for that. If you're already stacking that old combo of torpedoes with those fragmentation launchers knocking out submerged defense, these can be very interesting, especially because they can engage with those giant buzzsaws on their spines should the enemy get up close. However, at speed 5, they're not particularly fast. They're called assault submarines, but I think you'd be hard pressed getting them into, you know, to collide with anything to get a lot out of that Vengeance keel saw. I think that is a bonus rather than an actual strength. Let's just put it that way. Next up is the Nautilus, special version of those Morganas, and the interesting part is this can be part of a mercenary fleet that every other army can take. So every fleet can benefit from taking this ship. Compared to the normal one, it does come with an additional point of armor, which is great. Comes with an additional point of hull, that's great. It becomes a flagship within its own fleet, that's fun. But it's 55 points more. That is a lot. That is a lot. And what do you get for that one? Well, it can ram its through the opponent through the unstoppable rule. So when you're making a ramming action, you can just automatically disengage and just go through your opponent. However, speed 5, good luck running through an opponent in one go. That seems like a very weird one. It can, however, increase its speed by 1, so I'm getting an extra +2 to the ramming dice pool, so that could make it work slightly better. It has Shadow Hunter as well, meaning it's allowed to redeploy. However, I don't consider Shadow Hunter to be that useful for any submerged units. They are already deployed last, and trying to do a bait and switch on your opponent in a game where you have to deploy your air units first, then your normal surface units, and only then your submerged units, means that Shadow Hunter is not quite as useful as it perhaps could be. Advanced repair teams is useful though. There's nothing wrong with rolling an additional 2 action dice for repair tests, just in case you get some extra disorder tokens or damage. You can also benefit from having an upgraded heavy torpedo salvo to the rear, which is great, but again, awkward to set up, of course. Shooting both to the front and the back is not that easy. Next up is also a new Canadian entry, the Newfoundland attack cruiser. Seems like a very good one. I mean, very straightforward, although coming in at 114 points, that one is, again, on the expensive side. Ablative armor, great. Internal Guardian generator, great. Toughed old boots, in other words, but you are paying the points for that, so it's, it's not one that immediately grabbed me, but it's not a bad entry as well. You also get the Orca Hunter submarine, which just has a regular torpedo salvo, but again, 60 points for 2 Mass 1 Orca submarines means they could really work well together if you're making good use out of Trident generators in your fleet. So you've got a sudden access to very, very cheap torpedo salvos with Pack Hunter, so you're stacking extra dice if you're attacking with at least 3 models in that unit, and at just 30 points per model, why wouldn't you go for the unit of 6 in this case? They're very good at attacking other submerged units if you combine them with any SRS tokens nearby within 5 inch. I like this entry. Seems like a very good one to get. The usual Armor 4 and Citadel 8 for Mass 1 ships, but again, at 30 points, you can't complain. Solid entry. The Picton Light Cruiser is one of the first things that you could make out of the frontline squads from the Crown. At 90 points, I also think that this one is a bit expensive for what it does, because you do get that normal gun battery and heavy gun battery, so that's great. Those two always work together rather well. With the torpedo salvo, at 90 points, it's not horrible. It definitely isn't, but it's nothing stellar in my book either. You do get the Pack Hunters also squeezing out a few extra dice, despite only having a regular gun battery, could work. You know, solid entry, nothing amazing though. And then we have the Yukon Auxiliary Cruiser, 125 points. Again, one of the new Canadian entries that are mine layers and mine sweepers, so you get that lovely little bonus to go with it. Heavy is the word as well, heavy gun battery to the front, 2 of them, heavy broadsides, and a normal torpedo salvo, however, again with the internal Guardian generator and the ablative prow armor. It's a bit of an upgrade compared to the other squadrons, and if you want some mine generators for it and heavy broadsides, that doesn't seem like a horrible deal, for given you're only paying 15 points more compared to the other ones. So I would consider this one for sure. And that was it. That was the whole rundown of the Crown battle fleet. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future videos if you want to see them. Bye!